Man, DC fans are having an incredible month. And now we are hearing that Henry Cavill is in talks to return to the role of Superman in the DCEU. So let's break this down and explain to you guys why the implications of this are way bigger than you might first realize. The first matchup in the Nerd Card Showdown is taking place on our live streaming channel June 3rd at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. You are not going to want to miss that. So yes, Henry Cavill is coming back to the role of Superman in the DCEU. I want to break down the official news about this. Then I'm going to talk about some of the behind-the-scenes stuff, what people have been saying. And then I also want to explain why anybody out there saying they know exactly what will happen next is wrong! Okay, so I saw this pop up on comicbook.com. I'm going to read right from their article a little bit, and then we'll talk about what it means. It says here, Henry Cavill will once again put on Superman's red cape for DC films. While a report in 2018 suggested Cavill left the role behind, comicbook.com has learned that Cavill and Warner Brothers have set a deal for the Man of Steel actor to reprise his role as Superman in future DC Comics-based films. The deal does not mean that Man of Steel 2 is in the works. Instead, the studio will use Cavill's Superman similarly to how Marvel Studios has used the Hulk, playing supporting roles and making cameo appearances in films headlined by other heroes. The future of the Superman film series, with or without Cavill, remains to be determined. The studio has not yet decided which films will include Cavill's Superman. This new deal is a part of the reason that Cavill appeared on director Zack Snyder's live stream rewatch of Man of Steel last week, the same stream where Snyder announced that his cut of Justice League is coming to HBO Max. Cavill debuted as Superman in Man of Steel and played the role again in Snyder's Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice and Justice League. Snyder intended for Cavill to return in a second Justice League movie, but those plans fell through when Joss Whedon replaced Snyder during Justice League's post-production. Okay, I want to read the last paragraph here because it says something really important, and it has a quote from Henry Cavill himself. So it says here, Cavill has expressed an interest in returning to the role of Superman in the past. Quote, where we left off with Man of Steel in particular was the guy who had found his place, or was trying to find his place, but had sort of found it by the end. That had committed something which he would consider the most horrific sin by killing the last member of his species. That is a place where I would like to travel from with the character, him exploring the positivity of who he is, not necessarily the chocolate box version, but leaning into that character who becomes an icon of hope and enjoying that experience rather than necessarily being made uncomfortable by it. This whole Cavill coming back to the Superman role was a highly rumored thing. Now, there are people out there that are going to tell you, what do you mean coming back to the role? He never left the role. But as the comicbook.com article mentions, in 2018, there was a lot of fallout about how Cavill was not going to be playing Superman anymore. You will remember this. We covered this. It was crazy stuff. His manager comes out and makes a statement. He has that weird video on Instagram with him holding the Superman toy. A lot of fallout. People were pretty pissed that Cavill was not going to be Superman in the DCEU anymore. And so I think everybody's saying like, oh, he never left the role. You're just not paying attention. Yeah, Cavill is going to be coming back to the role, and him being on that stream with Zack Snyder when they revealed the Snyder Cut was a big hint to that. Many nerds believe there's got to be something going on there. And even before that, Humberto Gonzalez and the people over at Heroic Hollywood broke a scoop talking about how something had changed behind the scenes and the Supergirl movie was being sidelined, and the studio was said to be more concerned with the future of Superman before they did a spin-off character like Supergirl. We broke that story down, and it looks like that was 100% true. I told you guys that dude knew what he was talking about. Interesting side note here, when we ran that story, and I was like, yeah, I think Humberto's got this. I think this is real. Grace Randolph, who is obviously a big DC scooper and just a scooper in general, came out on Twitter and said she couldn't run a story like that because she had heard that there was no deal, that Superman wasn't coming back, that Cavill wanted too much money. And so she had kind of said that like Humberto was wrong and that story wasn't real, right? And it's just interesting, and I think it's worth mentioning because although Grace has gotten a lot right, she got that one wrong. However, Grace did change her tune around the time when the Snyder Cut was going to be introduced, and she did talk about how the negotiations had turned, and now it did look like they were going to figure that out. Now, according to Grace, Cavill just wanted more money, and what I think is happening here is everybody's just getting a little bit more of what they want. So Cavill's probably getting a little bit closer to the amount of money that he made. He's making concessions, like perhaps coming back and filming for the Justice League with Zack Snyder, being buddy-buddy with him, showing up on the stream. And we'll get to this in a second because I think that the job that AT&T and Warner Brothers and everybody at DC Films has done over the past couple of weeks is some crazy, remarkable good stuff. And it's actually very quickly changed the perception and the story surrounding DC Films moving forward. It's wild stuff. But let me just explain this. There is a lesson here when you look at Umberto and Grace and the way they've been reporting these scoops. And the lesson is...
difficult to see. Always emotion is the future.
Well, thanks a lot, Master Yoda. But in all seriousness, guys, that's totally true. Like, I talk about the people that I think are actually good at scooping. That does not mean they're going to get everything correct. That does not mean that they're infallible. And in fact, particularly in situations like this, things just change a lot. And so I respect both of these people. I think they're both onto something here. But again, I think the simple fact that AT&T has come in and done this has shaken the foundations of what you would call normal procedure according to the Hollywood rules.
You underestimate my power!
So let's go back to Henry Cavill and the Superman role in general. Now, the article at comicbook.com talks about the Hulk situation. That's really interesting. I wonder where they are getting that exactly. Is that a new development? And I ask that because in 2018, it was more like Nick Fury and not like the Incredible Hulk. Back then, the whole deal was Warner Brothers wanted to do these cameos with Henry Cavill and have him sprinkled throughout the movie, sort of recruiting, much like they did with Nick Fury in the original MCU. And apparently, the reports back then said Cavill was totally not down for that. That is why you get the Cavill suit in the cameo for Shazam, but you don't actually get Henry Cavill there, okay? Henry Cavill wasn't originally down with that. And so I'm wondering, has that changed? Now, instead of it just going to be a cameo that's sort of a Nick Fury thing, are we really going to get a Hulk situation where Superman might play a pretty significant role in maybe Shazam 2 or in Aquaman 2 or in any other coming DC movie? That would be really interesting, and I think it lines up more with what Cavill would want. Now, a couple other important points that I want to get to here. Here's the deal. I just told you guys I really respect both of these scoopers, Grace and Umberto, and I just think in general, like, there are some really good people in that game that are doing the best they can, and I think the internet is unfair to these people when they miss the scoops. But here's the thing. There are a lot of people coming out there with hot takes and being very certain about what they think will happen next with DC, what movies they think Henry Cavill will show up in, when Man of Steel 2 will come out, if it comes out. Let me just explain something to you guys. All of the rules are broken. I don't think I would be definitive or speak definitively about the possibilities at all when it comes to this situation. The Snyder Cut situation itself is ridiculous. AT&T came in and broke all the rules. There is nothing that says they can't do that again. Everybody that's saying that Ben Affleck Batman can't come back, I think, forget what you think you know. Everybody's saying that they will never cancel the Batman film. Well, you're probably right. They're not going to cancel the Matt Reeves Batman film. But that is not to say they couldn't, at the same time, develop Batman other places. My point is, we know nothing, Jon Snow. And I just got to say, like, bravo. Like bravo to AT&T, bravo to the people at Warner Brothers that helped make this happen, bravo to Zack Snyder, bravo to Henry Cavill, bravo to everybody involved. This is absolutely ridiculous. And you know, I told you guys when we first broke down everything we know about the Snyder Cut, in that video, I was fascinated by a statement that Deborah Snyder made to THR the day they did that interview. She talked about taking the versions of the characters that we had with Zack and getting them to the more iconic, more comic book type place. There's a huge divide in the DC fan base to this day over Zack Snyder's treatment of these characters, the dark and gritty version of the DCEU, and the more relatable sort of, I guess, just less dark, more heroic version from the comic books. That has been a divide that has been there forever. But it looks like right now they have figured out a path to give all parties involved a little bit of what they want and go from Zack's version to the more comic book version of these characters. And Cavill's statement in this comicbook.com article is incredibly telling, because if you notice back here, he says not necessarily the chocolate box version, but the leaning into that character who becomes an icon of hope and enjoying that experience rather than necessarily being made uncomfortable by it. Now, I don't know exactly what he means there, but I will say it was sort of uncomfortable for me in Joss Whedon's Justice League when it's just all of a sudden Superman is the Boy Scout. Like, we never actually see him grow into that. And I do think that he could also be discussing how it's sort of uncomfortable for certain Superman fans to see Superman snapping necks and cashing checks. I totally get it. And I know that they had to work from where they were at to get to where they are going. And that was sort of the trouble for me. The hang up for me as a fan was I don't see how they're going to do it. And it doesn't even look like they want to try. It doesn't even look like they have a plan. They just want to pretend that Zack Snyder's tone and all that stuff didn't exist. Well, now it seems like for the first time in years, they have a legitimate plan. And it does seem like they can actually bring all of the comic book fans back together and get them on the same page moving forward. And I just have to applaud that. That's incredible. I'm personally more excited for the future of DC films than I have been in a long time. But that's it. That is the news, the implications, what I think about it, what's going on with the scoopers. And the fact is, nobody can really be certain of what the future holds. So I want to know, what do you think, comic book fans? Let us know what you're thinking in those comments down below. And now let's shout out Liam M. Indeed, it was Rio who is the pilot of Beckett's crew in Solo, a Star Wars story. And now let's ask another nerd card question before we get out of here. I want to know, what is the name of Darkseid before he becomes Darkseid? He actually had a different name before he becomes the iconic leader of Apocalypse, Darkseid. What was his name before? Answer that question in the comment section below. If you absolutely need more nerdy content in your life, click or tap over there to watch some more of our videos, or come on by our live streaming channel where we live stream every day, Monday through Friday, starting at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Like this video if you liked it, and if you want to take your support to the next level and join this list of amazing people you see below, check out our Patreon for some behind-the-scenes content. As I always say, I hope you're having an awesome and a nerdy day, and I'll see you in the next video.